We're downtown in Boston right now, where it is chilly. It's always chilly in Boston. And Boston is such an interesting mishmash of really historic sites and high-rises and narrow streets that wind and meander all over the place, sometimes seemingly incoherently. It is very hard to know intuitively where you're going. Boston's downtown is also organized in a couple different chunks. So this is kind of the eastern end of Boston's downtown, but it kind of sprawls for a while. It loosely is organized around the Boston Common. Here, by the way, is the old State House in Boston, which you can see is surrounded by skyscrapers, but it is part of a very interesting little collection of historic buildings here that collectively tell the story of the Revolutionary War and ensuing years in the history of the United States. So, if we were to walk 15 minutes that way, which I don't have time to do right now, we would get over to the Paul Revere House and the Old North Church, which is where Paul Revere, or somebody who is a facsimile of Paul Revere. Paul Revere was attributed with the act, although it probably wasn't him, hanging 2 lanterns to alert the Sons of Liberty that the British were going to come and invade by sea. There was a little bit of faulty intelligence around what the British were actually going to do, but Paul Revere was a very important person in the Revolutionary War era because he was important for alerting members of the sort of rabble-rousers. Some of the things that were going on, he was also sort of a messenger pigeon of sorts that would help communicate important messages between Boston, Philadelphia, New York, which in those days, on horseback, required somebody very adept at rapid horseback riding, and Paul Revere certainly was. Of course, nobody wanted to really take credit for being the person that was, in effect, committing treason there by alerting the rebels, essentially, that the British were coming to arrest some of them, quash their rebellion. But the Old North Church is where Paul Revere hung 2 lanterns, and that is just across, it's a little over this way. We'd have to go under a highway and some stuff to get there. But in the meantime, we have Faneuil Hall and Quincy Market over here, which is a famous destination, history of Boston. Today is a very lively and active food market. Of course, similarities here with the architecture of Independence Hall in Philadelphia. There's Quincy Market. There's North Market.
If anybody else wants to grab something else, I'm real long.
What's interesting is how they have integrated history with, like, they have an Abercrombie and Fitch right there, and then a whole bunch of fancy stores, Coach and such. But the food is really good in Quincy Market. And then just a little bit that way, just a little hop, skip, and a jump, so they say, is the Boston Harbor. And as you can hear, the seagulls. There are a whole bunch of different harbor islands that bear different significances in the Revolutionary War, including a couple of forts that you can take a little boat ride and go tour. The waterways in Boston kind of meander all over the place too, which creates a lot of really interesting little spots. The Contemporary Art Museum in Boston kind of hangs over the water. There's an aquarium. There's a couple of little wharfs. They're very fun. And of course, the Charles River tucks in and becomes kind of the waterway that Boston generally is organized around. It's a very slow and stagnant, sludgy river. They actually infilled a whole bunch of the marshland in the river to create the Back Bay in Boston a long time ago. And you go west, the direction that we're walking. If you walk far enough, eventually you'll get to the famous Charles MGH Hospital complex. Well, first of all, you get to Boston Common and the Swan boats. You can also buy some salty nuts there. They're being very tasty. And then you will get to some of the really amazing retail streets in Boston. Boylston Street, famous street, and Commonwealth Avenue. Some really, really fancy row homes. Now, you also have, over that direction, Beacon Hill, which is home to some really fancy houses and very historic. Sort of like Old City in Philadelphia. Just kind of a beautiful area. And then you get the Charles MGH Hospital complex. You cross the Charles River at one of its wider spots. If you're taking the Red Line, eventually you get to the campus of MIT. See, along the way, you also got Boston University's over there, across the river. And then you keep going, you go through Cambridge. Boston itself is actually kind of a small city, but adjacent to it is Cambridge and Somerville. And Cambridge, of course, is where both MIT and Harvard are located. So Harvard Square is kind of a famous destination in Boston as well. Right now we are walking up these stairs. You can see the old State House poking through again. But this monstrosity is Boston City Hall Plaza. Boston is a very interesting and historic city, but they've also messed a lot of things up, like building this horrifying edifice of a giant building and this humongous empty plaza in front of it. Where, as you can see, there's very little activity other than people just trying to walk to get to other parts of downtown. There is an entrance to one of Boston's T stations. That's their underground subway system. Every city seems to have a different little shorthand for their system. Their Boston's is the T. It's a little confusing with the inbound and outbound designations of the routes that all come together at Downtown Crossing, which is another little area of downtown, sort of a theater district of sorts. If you go south, you get to South Station, which is their train station. You get a little branch waterway. Across that, you get to the South Boston waterfront, which is kind of an up-and-coming area of the city. Then you go far enough, you get to the airport, which is pretty close to downtown, although not very convenient to get to things by way of across the downtown. There's all kinds of things we could talk about in Boston. They've got a great symphony hall, Fenway Park, Back Bay.
Whatever you want to do, Sean.
And one of the eternal realities of Boston, which is getting lost. It's just an inevitable reality of trying to navigate this city, because the streets don't follow any intuitive pattern. Because Boston's very old. And it did not have like a nice, neat and tidy layout like Philadelphia did. Boston is also famous for the Freedom Trail, which connects several sites across the city that were instrumental in the Revolutionary War, paving the trail to freedom. Breed's Hill, Bunker Hill, of course, is one of those sites. The Old North Church, the Paul Revere House, another one. Then you have these little random cemeteries tucked in the city, across the street from big modern high-rises. Old City Hall. With apparently a Ruth's Chris Steakhouse in it. As we walk across the city, the Freedom Trail is basically a red line that you follow all across the city, which is really fun. John Quincy. Josiah Quincy.